Thank you very much, Baupas, for having made time to give an important account about an important historical figure in the shaping of our history of this part of the world. I think we must congratulate you. These days, this generation of ours just, vacillates through history without wanting to account with proper platforms like book writing about where we come from, where we are, and where we are heading. That's the first point I want to make. But I want to also start with a disclaimer in the backdrop of the topic I saw. I think you did not go deep into the topic that I think the organizers gave for us. So maybe my view is that I must now get into it, because I suspect you will have a rejoinder and have an opportunity to come back. But I also want to make another disclaimer that I've not had an opportunity to read your book. But as I was browsing through the topics there, I can tell where each and every one is going. And I have a fair sense of how you've drafted vis-a-vis the summary that you've given us now. I commit myself to reading it and writing a review on one of the newspapers and journals about it, so that I'm also able to join the fray of what I think of the book and the typology of contribution it makes to the discourse about this important historical figure. The next disclaimer I want to make now in the context of the topic, I'm sure all of you saw, I did not craft that topic. It's the organizers of the African Book Club. They want us to discuss the question whether Lucas Mangope was a collaborationist or he was a developmentalist. I want to venture into that, so that when you do your rejoinder, from the perspective of what you've written in the book, you're able to correct some of the thoughts that I'm going to put on the table. But here's the disclaimer I want to make in the context of the topic, I don't like discussing what is called traitors or collaborators during apartheid 30 years after democracy. It's a topic that makes me uncomfortable for three reasons. The first reason is that most of these people are already dead or dying, both literally and proverbially. And I want them to rest in peace. The second reason is that the last time in the context of our democracy, I wrote about one of the historic figures, very colossal, who, in my view, in fact, based on historical accounts, was an apartheid collaborationist. I got into trouble with some of his fans. And I suppose you're going to also be in trouble with those who review this book and they see certain things that they think you are saying are unfair about Lucas Mangope. And they threatened that they're going to bewitch me. And I think they have succeeded. Because since that threat, my things started going south. And I'm sure you know that from this place that you come from, Roots, witchcraft is an art. So we are in trouble. The third reason I want to foreground on a very serious note is the fact that talking about these historical figures, 30 years after democracy, who they've called spies, collaborators, this, that, and the other, makes me uncomfortable. I want to now talk about the current collaborators. Those who are collaborating with our current oppressors, and those who are collaborating with neocolonialism. But I suppose that's not what Khubulemo and Sello had in mind. So that's a topic for another day. But that's where I want to go when we have time. But let me go back now to the topic. The topic says, was Mangope a collaborationist or a developmentalist? That's what these colleagues of us want us to engage in. And of course, taking wisdom from your book. So, I'm a creature of method. This is how I want to approach relating my thoughts around this thing, this topic. Those of you who are familiar with atomic physics would know that currents and electrons flow in opposite directions. I want to behave like a typical current and flow from positive to the negative. So I want to start with the positive elements of Lucas Mangope. Firstly, for me, we cannot ignore in the positive elements of this colossal being the fact that he was a great evangelist of the Setswana language and culture. Like WHP would say, he made Setswana fashionable when we were growing up. For that you can't take away from him. Secondly, he was an orator. And when I talk oratory, I'm talking about oratory par excellence. You know, when we were growing up, I'd never seen a guy who can talk for 3 hours without holding a piece of paper, making sense from intro to conclusion. And by sense, I'm talking logic, and I'm not saying he was talking the right politics. So he was a great orator, and I think he inspired a lot of people who today are leaders, just from his leadership style. There were a lot of people who went around talking like him. One of them works in the mayor's office. I'm just trying to make sure that you keep your concentration. One of the things about Lucas Mangope that you cannot miss if you are fair to the man, because I think that's what you try to do, to give a balanced account, is the fact that Lucas Mangope was a great, I want to find the right words, infrastructure expansionist, which is the point you make. He built us schools, stadia, he built us Mabana, he built us airport, he built us all sorts of infrastructure that took Bophutaswana since he took over from 1972, before the nominal independence in 1977. You know, this was a construction site, and all sorts of things came, which his people came to appreciate, as opposed to other places in South Africa. You can't take those things away from him if we are to be fair. As to why he did them and how is a subject also of interest. So we say all of these things that are positive for everybody to know that we are not trying to criticize the man unfairly. In fact, if anything, we acknowledge the positives of his leadership. and we are not trying to bury him again. I saw the Premier of Gauteng, Manyaza, wearing a t-shirt, "I don't kill Chrisani again." We are not trying to kill Mangope again. We acknowledge the positives from his leadership. Now I move to the negatives. You know, one person the other day was asking me, what would be my definition of a great leader who builds a nation builder, which I think is the template all leaders who I have interest in, I judge them against. Whether I have to analyze Fidel Castro, I will tell you there are 5 things for me that we have to analyze him against as to whether he was a proper nation builder, whether it is Mao Zedong, whether it is Deng Xiaoping in China, whether it is Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe. That also applies to Mangope. There are 5 things for me. The first thing is that a leader must have great vision for his people. The second thing is that that vision must be underpinned by a progressive ideology. The second thing is that there must be praxis. Let me explain that one because I know that it's not a very simple term. He must have the ability to take the ideology that guides him and transform it from theory into practice. That's the third thing. The fourth thing is the type of education system that this leader wants for his people, both in terms of quality and quantity. Importantly, the substance of the education system that this person wants for his people. The last one is ethics and principles. Now, when I look at the historical figures such as Mangope, I find him wanting in all these 5 accounts. I don't think he had a great vision for his people and all these other 5 things. But because we don't have time, I'm going to isolate just 2 and unpack for purposes of our engagement. Remember to answer the question whether this guy was a collaborationist or a developmentalist. So let's start with this one of education. You know, when you listen to people who revere Lucas Mangope, they say he was a great educationist. I don't agree. I don't think Lucas Mangope was a great progressive educationist. And I want to give you just a few reasons why I have that view, which will come back to answering this question whether he was a developmentalist or a collaborationist. Firstly, he did not, at the personal level, make time to formally educate himself. He had a teacher's diploma, I think he had a teacher's diploma and all of that. His peers, Robert Mugabe, had many degrees. Mandela tried to chop to Commonwealth University and so on. So for me, when you don't make time to educate yourself at the personal level, there are certain things that you will miss. So that's the first reason. It might sound simple, but it's not simplistic. The second one is that as a teacher, I'm talking progressive educationism here. Mangope finds himself in a country where black people are up in arms against the imposition of Africans. Remember 1974 decree. The apartheid government promulgates the Africans Medium of Instruction decree. Everybody's up in arms. On this hand, you have Mangope, who is teaching Africans. That's not progressive. He even wins awards on being a great teacher of Africans. That contrast, for me, tells you 2 stories. That this guy is going against, or swimming against the tide of what his people are worried about. Black people in South Africa are saying no to Africans, we reject it, we will not agree. Imagine, what it meant. It was not just a simple thing. It was a very serious thing. It meant that a black child who was studying or struggling through mathematics in his high school has to study mathematics in Afrikaans. Imagine having to study the 5 characteristics of the parallelogram in Afrikaans. What's the machine? That's why they were saying, but no. Rona, at our age, we are going to flatly oppose this thing. Mangope, he teaches this thing. He wins awards. The apartheid system thinks, this is one of our best guys. So for me, I'm coming closer to this topic. People are fighting Africans, he's collaborating. He's teaching. He does not even have the political sensitivity to appreciate that this is wrong. I mean, if you contrast him against many other guys, Opposite Hero came from the same area. Same area. Right? Younger than Mangope at that time. He is expelled from Tefuo for having fought against, amongst others, the impositions of Africans as a medium of instruction in our school. This is one of the speeches he makes as part of his expulsion in Tefuo. He goes to Maurice Isaac to go and teach there. One of the students he teaches is theatre machinery. He teaches progressive history and black consciousness. I'm contrasting against his fellow village boy who looks at things differently. And theatre machinery becomes an important historical figure that leads the anti-Africans movement from a context of the student movement. I have to start there. So, from an educational perspective, he was not sensitive about what he was teaching young people, which would have, in my view, accounted for why people would have said he's a collaborationist. The other question from an educational perspective, both Yeti Mashinini are struggling with the argument that Africans must be scrapped as a medium of instruction. Here's Mangope in 1972 goes to the apartheid regime and says, no, I can sanitize this model for you. I can actually make sure that this thing does not look this bad. They give him money, he builds schools. And you pick up in the speeches he made, there's a book you must read when you have time called A Place for All. He launches a book in, he launches a technical high school, technical and commercial high school on the 27th of April 1976, just before the nominal independence. And in this speech, he makes a worrisome point about his philosophy of education. I'm talking about Mangope and progressive educationism now. He makes a worrisome point. He says, as he launches the school, every society must have a majority of its citizens having technical skills, but importantly, conforming to conventions, and more seriously, which is the worrisome part, they must be able to listen to instructions from above. What is he teaching? Conformism. He goes further and says only a minority, less than 5%, must be critical thinkers and change controllers. He doesn't talk about change, embracing change. So these people in his mind that he's going to build schools for must be couched as people who must be passive. They must behave as proper black people who do not rattle the cage for the white masters in Pretoria. So my view is that Mangope was building, in as much as they built all these nice schools from an infrastructure perspective, he had a mandate from the apartheid government to build a passive black person who does not question apartheid. And for me, that's one side. And he says it in his own speeches. If you don't believe me, go to that book, A Place for All, and read the speech he makes in 1976, 27th of April. So I'm not making this thing. So his philosophy to educating his people was about creating conservative conformists, and the minority that you would educate would become people who would control change, because he knew that the revolution was coming. So people say, no, but hey, he built a university here and so forth and so on. So for me, when you are operating at his level and you're trying to build a country and you're serious about it, you don't build one university, because clearly then he chose this thing where he wanted to create just a few who are critical thinkers. But when you build a university, it does not have an engineering department. You're presiding over an economy that envelopes 50% of the world's platinum. You don't produce engineers. So there was no interest on his part to produce people who would participate in the commanding heights of the economy of Bophutaswana, because he was building pacifists. He would have had to, for instance, produce mining engineers who would go and mine that platinum for us and ultimately own some of the shares. But he knew that the template that was given to him when he got the nominal independence in 1977 was that you don't touch the major minerals. You are just going to build a passive people who must not question our claim to the minerals of this country. I'm giving that example. For me, it's very clear. This university does not have a medical faculty. We are producing only nurses. All the nurses, all the doctors used to come from outside. And then the rest, his doctors are Batswana. Right? And then you tell me that this guy was a progressive educationist. I don't agree. I can go on and on, but the point I am making is that his methodology of educating his people was to feed into this passive black person that the apartheid regime wanted. Let me give another example. I went to a primary school called Magogodi Primary. One of the things I never forget as a child, remember in 1973, I think it's 72 or 73, Dr. Muthabani, you remind me. The United Nations took a resolution to declare apartheid a crime against humanity. For the first time, they had been fiddling with all these resolutions that was questioning the system here since the National Party came to power. But in 1972, they then take a position that no, this is a crime against humanity. Remember, there were many things that had happened in the 60s. Sharpeville massacre, this, that, and the other. And they said, no, but this is a crime against humanity. So, they declare a crime against humanity. You, as Mangope, you go and, despite all of that, take a system that sanitizes apartheid. I want to try this question of sanitizing apartheid. When I was in Magogodi Primary School, I don't forget the day when there were people from the United Nations who came here. And later on, after one gains political consciousness, I learned that these people had come here to come and inspect South Africa. as to whether it is indeed committing these crimes that we are seeing on TV, in the newspapers, and all of those things. Because the UN wanted to expedite sanctions against South Africa. So, Big Botha, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs at that time, knew that Mangope was a trusted ally to sanitize the image of apartheid. So they would bring these UN envoys here to come and inspect. And when they brought them there, they would take them to all these nice places. They would take them to Mabana. Wow, black kids are tumbling there. There's Tseko Mohonzi, Densi. Oh, these black people are taken care of. They go to Mabatu High, Mabatu Primary. Yeah, these young black kids are wearing uniform. They're clean. They've got scarftins.
They are wearing khaki.
Yeah? Do you understand? You know, they look to say the story that apartheid is a crime against humanity is actually not true. So Mangope was tasked with that thing. Big Botha brought the UN here to come and make it as part of their verification missions. When they left here, some of them left with a mixed feeling that there's an exaggeration about this thing called apartheid and its crimes against these black people. So Mangope played a very cardinal role in delaying our genuine liberation and self-determination. And that is a fact. That is why when we grew up as young activists, we took ups against him. It was not out of hatred, because we realized that this guy was used to delay the arrival at the democratic, non-sexist, non-racist, and prosperous society that all of us as black people wanted, with this nominal independence of his. Right? The people are making noise there. With this nominal independence of his. And for me, when I look at all these things, and I was talking about the education system, just as evident to say there was no progressive education system in Mangope. In fact, when I pick up all these things, I see collaboration. And if you ask me, this infrastructure that we praise him about, clearly it was part of the methodology of sanitizing the image of apartheid. They pumped millions into him. You made that point, an acknowledgement that one of the well-funded Bantu stands amongst the four. Remember, the others were just self-governing. But in the four that were funded as independent states, Bophutaswana used to get proper attention from a budgetary perspective. Precisely because they trusted him that he would be able to put together this infrastructure, that when the UN comes here, they'll be able to verify and say, no, but it's not true that black people are living in slums. They didn't take the UN to Hamudimura, where people were drinking water with animals. So I have to paint this picture that from a negative perspective, in terms of a progressive educationist, I don't think Mangope was. And as he expanded this infrastructure that all of us celebrate, let's be careful to understand the rationale of why he was doing all of these things. The last or penultimate point I want to make is I want us to study his mindset and what could have been happening. Answering the question, was he a collaborationist or a developmentalist? I've ruled out this development issue. Ramper, I know that you've interacted with the studies of development, and you would know that in 1987, there's a book written by a guy called Edgar Owens. He defines development for us. And he gives a very simple but not simplistic definition of development. Because we're more in the mix. I get what I'm using academic. I'm giving a simple definition. Yeah, Owens. Owens are when I got to one of our sons, Owens are, you measure development on the basis of the development of people, not things. So Mangope was developing things, not people. From a perspective of people, he was building pacifists who were going to reproduce conformity to apartheid. In Bophutaswana, we did not have access to truthful history about our country. Never wrote about the Great Tribe. What Lara Majola had for the one. Do you understand? We never learned about important things in the building of a nation and the kind of social fabric that South Africa is. Gender studies, for instance, there was no such thing in Bophutaswana. You know, no, the normal Mushimania, Tripe, Manyana, Amoripe, it was just a simple thing. Today, in this democratic dispensation, which has all its weaknesses, one of the things that are progressive about why we are here today, we have a gender agenda. In Bophutaswana, gender studies were not there. I'm talking about the development of the human being. Very important. You can't develop human beings and teach the boy that he's more superior to the girl. Mangope never developed us to want to own the means of production. He was developing us to participate in the means of consumption. That is why, in the context of the mining example I gave, there was no interest in putting us there because he knew that this was a preserve for his white masters. He would have just built the D account and all of this money from the mining, from the trillions that were going into mining. He got the accounts, put it in the D account, and abused it for his personal lavish lifestyle. And you give an account of one of the funds, for instance, that he abused. So that's one point I think we need to lift. So I am saying, having studied the man and his environment, now making the last point. In the 60s, I think the 60s was a very important era of his personal political development. He was in his 40s, right? There's a lot of things happening in the country. I'm interested in the direction he took. You'd remember that in 1960 in particular, we had the Sharpeville massacre, which angered every 40-year-old, right? In the same year, liberation movements are banned, the ANC, the PAC. 61, because of his anger as black people that they are killing our people, these boys are killing our people, Umkhonto Wesizwe is formed. 62, Mandela is arrested. It's a long trial, Rivonia gets arrested. Ultimately jail sent to Robben Island. In the same year, FIFA says to the apartheid regime, you can't come to the World Cup with an all-white team. These are the things that are happening. He's in his 40s. He can see all these things. Bad things that are happening from the perspective of apartheid. Fast forward, the liberation movement says we've been banned for a very long time, 1969. There's an important consultative conference that takes place in Tanzania called the Morogoro Conference. When that conference is closed by the President General of the ANC at that time, who was going to arrange that camp, he makes an important statement. He says to black people in South Africa, close ranks and intensify the armed struggle. Everybody responded to that call with wanting to go to exile, to join Umkhonto Wesizwe, to join Upline, the PAC, to take arms against the apartheid regime. Remember the vector, they will be killing our people. Sharpeville was one of those things. Mangope decides to his friends, as a collaborator, that he is going to go to the apartheid regime, cap in hand, and say, just give me my homeland. These ones are rotting in jail. I want to build my own country. I will sanitize apartheid for you. I will make it look good. I will delay the route towards general liberation and self-determination for you, just pump money into me. And that's what he did. And that for me says, when all is said and done, Manyane Mangope was a collaborator. He can't have been a developmentalist, because I dismiss him with this thing of development, because he did all these things as part of his sanitation project to ensure that apartheid does not look bad in the eyes of the international community, which had declared apartheid a crime against humanity. For now, I want to end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yes, makes it so hard. For those 2000, I don't know who they are. Mabato Primary, who are mentioned primary school. Yes, I knew I was to say.